I thought it might be interesting for our viewers to go back and talk a little bit about a general condition that was going on at this time frame, and starting with the change of presidents. This was a period of time, 1967. Don Typer, who had been the longtime president at Doane, resigned and went on to be the executive director of the Mississippi Valley College and University Association, and was replaced by Phil Heckman. Phil came from the East Coast. He was a Pennsylvania native and talked with a really strong Eastern twang, and we didn't really quite know what to make of him for a little while. He was Phil was a good president. He was very liberal compared to Typer, who was very conservative, and many of our board members were really conservative types. Most of them had gone through the Depression era, and when things were really, really tough, and they didn't want to take a chance on going through that again. So they were very conservative, as was Don Typer. And Phil came in, and he was ultra liberal in relation to the president that we'd had previously. More than that, Phil was about a half an actor. You never really were sure who you were talking to, whether you were talking to the real Phil or to some role that he was playing. And in fact, the matter is, when he left here 20 years later, 87 or so, he went on and had a second career as an actor in the Lincoln Playhouse in Lincoln, Nebraska, and was pretty good. I went to see a couple of his performances, and he was a really good actor. At any rate, Phil was the kind of guy who very gregarious, went out and was not afraid to meet people, was very comfortable in fundraising off campus. In fact, was much more comfortable off campus than he was on campus. Typer, on the other hand, just the opposite. I don't think he ever went off campus. And he made a habit of walking the campus every day. And if he saw a beer bottle or a can laying on the ground, he would pick it up and put it in the nearest Doane College vehicle. And so about half the time he'd be driving a van or a Doane car and come to a stop sign and put on the brakes, and here come about 6 beer bottles rolling out from underneath the seats. So it was a little disconcerting, and he was, Don Typer was liked athletics, but he had a really kind of a skewed idea about what athletics ought to be about. He was believed in the old strictly amateur kind of approach to it. He was really turned on with the Olympic Games. I don't think in the time frame that I was here, and we overlapped, I don't think he ever missed an Olympic Games. And would travel. He and his wife went to Australia. He took a sabbatical, 6 months sabbatical, so they could go to Australia for the Melbourne Games. And he was really into that. He was really into the Drake relays. He had originally come from Iowa, and so he had that Drake relays steeped into him. And I don't think he ever missed a Drake relays. In fact, kind of a funny story. After he had left Doane, and this is probably maybe 12 or 15 years later, I'm at the Drake relays, and we're running a morning afternoon session type thing, a split thing, and sent the kids home back to the hotel, and they were going to bring another group out for the afternoon races. And so I'm walking down underneath the stands going to the concession stand to get a hot dog for lunch. And who do I run into but Don Typer? And we talked for a little bit, and he just proceeded to give me hell. He ripped me one way and up one side and down the other because we were wearing at that time black and white warm-up suits, white tops, black bottoms. And he said, Doan's College, his colors are orange and black, not black and white, and I can't find them, and you better change those. And he just went on and on and on. People are standing there looking at us like, what the hell's going on there? But that was Don. He liked athletics. He had a kind of a warped sense of what reality was athletically. He conveniently forgot that we were scholarshiping kids, and that made them technically professionals. But he was big into the amateur thing. Phil, on the other hand, liked athletics, was a very competitive person. His personality was just fantastically competitive. And he came from the YMCA. That was where he was. He was in the YMCA program back east someplace. And so he had this idea of participation. Everybody should participate in all of this. And he believed in athletics as a physically improving your body and all of that. But he was a competitive guy. He just loved pickleball. And when he came here in late '60s, people had never seen pickleball. I didn't know what it was. And but he got the maintenance department to paint a pickleball court on his driveway, and you can still see it there at the president's house in the driveway. And he and Bill Gross would play every weekend and take on anybody who wanted to drive by and take him on in a pickleball match. They'd be there ready to go. And he was a very competitive guy from that standpoint. And I think he understood the importance of athletics in the whole scheme of things for Doane College, what was good for Doane. And as it evolved and developed, and it was a necessary thing. And he was, I can say this for him. I don't think I ever went in and talked to him that I didn't feel like I got a fair hearing. I always felt that he didn't always agree with me, and you didn't get what you wanted necessarily, but Phil was one of the guys that if you had a legitimate request, he would do his best to fill it out. I can recall a time, and this is later on, we had been using the country club for our cross-country meets. And one year we got a new board, a different board of directors at the country club, and all of a sudden they decided no, that we weren't going to be able to run there. And they do this the day before, 2 days before we're supposed to host the district NAIA meet. And so I have to scramble around, and we have Concordia ran on their course, and I was embarrassed, man. I was madder than heck. And I dropped my membership to the country club for probably 10 years after that. I was upset. And I went to Phil, and I said, hey, we got to have a place where we can run cross country that somebody else isn't dictating it. We got to be on the campus. And I explained the whole thing to him, and he said, okay. And he called in Larry Reckling, who was the head of the maintenance department then, and said, this guy needs a cross-country course on our campus, see that it gets done. And so Larry lived right up the street from me, and so we got together, and he got Lowell Lieberspacher or somebody on our maintenance staff with a huge John Deere tractor and a brush hog cutter behind it. And he said, "You walk and I'll follow you." And so that's essentially our cross-country course. I just walked and he drove around and we mowed everything down in sight, and that wasn't, that big around. And it was, but Phil was good from that standpoint that he would, when he was available, he wasn't hard to approach. He was really good at delegating his responsibilities and delegating the work out to the second tier of administrators, and he had a good group. He was very, very good at picking the right people for the right jobs. And we had Dave Osterhout, and it was our business manager then, and Pappy Curry was the director of admissions, and Bill Gross was from the fundraising group, and it was he had a good group of people under him, and he could do that. He could let people run with an idea, and because he was probably off campus raising money. He was a heck of a fundraiser, and he was probably off campus as much as he was on or more, and it was I liked Phil, and he was always very good to me and to our program. I thought he supported us. Now the other thing at that time frame was that the general nationwide upheaval. It was chaotic. The Vietnam War was in full swing, and people were just, it was a very unpopular war, and government was unpopular. And that transmitted to the college age adults a real distrust for authority, and of course that made coaching difficult, because by definition a coach is an authority figure, and we had people who would question what we were doing and why and so forth, and so you had to be a little bit careful in terms of what you did and what you said, how you said it, and it was we had, they were burning draft cards, and the Kent State thing, we talk about police brutality and so forth. Well, they killed 17 kids on a college campus with National Guard opened fire on them at this period, and it was a really chaotic period. Now, because of the geography of the thing, we were insulated, I think, here in some respects, and it wasn't as we had a sit-in or two on our campus where kids came in, they were going to take over the administration building or something. And Phil was pretty good. He was the right guy to be president in that era, because he could slick talk them. And the first thing you know, he's got them talked into going back to their classes or going back to the dorms or whatever. And we had, the Doane Owl decided they were going to quit publishing for a semester or something. They were crossways with the administration. So that, you know, it's. I guess my point is that upheaval and the feeling of disrespect for authority is nothing new in this country. It's an age-old thing that becomes more apparent in one era than another, but it runs through most of that history.